So, I don't really know where to start with this. To put it bluntly, someone has been standing outside of my door. No, not an actual front door, I mean my bedroom door. I'm not a psycho who sleeps with my door open, mostly because I used to have sleep paralysis, which often resulted in me waking up in my hallway completely horrified by the man I saw at the end of it. So now, I physically cannot sleep with it open. Well, I'm beginning to think the man in those sleep paralysis dreams weren't just sleep paralysis demons. Basically, this has been going on for 5 days now, and it's getting increasingly more weird. At first, I thought it was my grandma playing jokes on me, until I walked into her room about to raise hell. She passed out cold. The second night, I actually woke her up. I claimed her jokes weren't funny and I needed sleep, as I'm a senior in high school graduating. She was obviously pissed. I woke her up and went back to sleep. I went back into my room beyond confused, sat on my bed in dead silence and just listened. Nothing. So, the third night, Tuesday night to be exact, is when I didn't get a wink of sleep because of the noises. At first it was shuffling, definitely playing it off as my grandma. Until it walked past my door, stopped about halfway into my dad's room doorway and walked back out, standing dead in front of my door. My dog lifted his head, so obviously I expected my granny to walk in. She never did. Instead, the sounds that followed made this dog, my sweet boy who isn't afraid of anything, cower and shake behind my legs as we laid there. Picture the sound of someone sucking the roof of their mouth with clicks at the end of each suck, almost like they were calling, taunting something towards them. The noises didn't stop until the birds started chirping, which was roughly 4 in the morning. The fourth night nothing really happened, just the shuffling. Although I will say the shuffling came and went for about 3 hours, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Okay, so this is what happened last night. The sounds didn't start, which made me think it was finally over. Maybe I was just tired and it was just my brain using its imagination. But that's when it happened. For reference, my door doesn't have one of those metal door latches, so it's very easy to rattle my door, and it's almost like my doors are slightly cracked. First, it was the shuffling. Granted, it was much later in the night, and it was much more rushed. Instead of doing the usual dad's doorway thing, it immediately rushed from the end of the hallway, slammed its face into the crevice of my door and began breathing heavily. Not like an out-of-breath breathing either. I'm talking like a continuous sighing kind of deep breath. The worst part about this? My grandma wasn't home. I instantly thought I didn't lock the doors and a fucking intruder was in my house. The breathing continued. I had 2 options here: wait for whoever, or whatever this was, to open my door, or get up and lock it. I chose the second option and quickly got up, slamming it locked. The breathing instantly stopped. Until it didn't. I called my grandma in a panic. She thought I was joking until the breathing turned into aggressive yanking my door forwards and backwards against the wooden enclosure. She obviously heard this, and turned dead serious. I told her I wasn't waiting around for this thing to get in here, so she agreed to call the police and rush home. I grabbed my dog, pulled my screen in and jumped out of my window. I have this pine tree right outside of my window. And thank God I'm 5 feet 2 inches, which allows me to easily fit into small spaces. I waited for maybe 10 minutes before 2 distinct sirens pulled up. I wasn't leaving until my grandma got me. No way in hell. She got there not too long after the cops and pulled me and my dog from the tree. Obviously terrified, we approached one of the officers waiting for us. Basically, they swept the entire house, and there was nobody. Although my door was splintered and it was evident someone had gotten in. But the worst part was that all of the doors were locked. Dead bolted and locked from the knob. Not a single window was unlocked or had suspicious activity. I didn't sleep there that night. I asked my grandma if we could get a hotel. And even the cops agreed we should, so we did. This is something I really experienced. I never believed in voodoo, despite my wife's claims that her mom could perform spells. I dismissed it as nonsense. One day, while we were living together, my wife's mom claimed that our Haitian neighbor was appearing in her dreams and creeping around our yard at night. She said she would cast a spell to keep him away. I remained skeptical and expressed my disbelief. One night, as the hours grew late, I found myself engrossed in a marathon of slasher horror movies. The time was well past 2 a.m. when I heard the creaking of stairs, signaling the approach of my wife's mother. To my surprise, she descended with an eerie smile etched across her face. Her eyes glinted with an otherworldly confidence as she beckoned me to the back window. By then, she had already performed her spell. Trembling with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, I ventured closer and cast my gaze into the impenetrable darkness outside. To my astonishment, there he was, the Haitian man, slowly traversing the edges of our property, moving with a creepy stride that sent shivers down my spine. His every step seemed purposeful, as if driven to find a way through some invisible barrier surrounding my yard. My wife's mother stood beside me, her voice laced with a haunting tone, whispering, "I told you." A wave of unease washed over me, the experience haunting my thoughts for the rest of the night. The following day, I was fishing in my backyard with my pit bull boat tied to a nearby tree. Suddenly, a strong breeze swept through, causing Bo to stand up and sniff the air. He began growling, and I sensed something eerie. I quickly untied him and brought him inside. As I placed my fishing pole in the garage, I heard Bo barking ferociously. Our living room had a large glass door facing the backyard, so I went to investigate. To my surprise, the Haitian man stood right outside the glass, staring blankly into my house. It unnerved me, so I retreated out of sight. After a couple of minutes, Bo continued barking persistently. I returned to the back door, and the man was still there, fixated on the same spot. With a sense of discomfort, I approached to grab Bo's collar. When I was about a foot away from the man, I looked into his eyes and felt as though he was looking through me, rather than at me. As I walked away with Bo, he remained in the same spot, gazing emptily. I'm unsure how long it took for him to leave, but he moved away shortly after that incident. It completely changed my perspective on voodoo. So here I am, 24 years old, and I've just bought my first house. After a few years of jumping from apartments to moving in with friends, I finally had enough to buy my first house. It's nothing too special though, a one-story house with 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. Decent-sized living room and kitchen. The man who sold me this house was a little strange. He introduced himself as David. He didn't talk much, but the times he did, he kept his sentences short and straight to the point. He told me the previous owners lost a child in that house. I think she was around 16 to 18 when she passed. This unsettled me a bit, but I figured everything would be fine. So I unpacked my things, and a few days later I threw a housewarming party. I invited all of my family and friends and told them they could all bring some people along. We were drinking, playing music, and I occasionally had to tell some of the younger guests off for using drugs, but all in all it was a great party. I recognized almost everyone, but there was one girl who really caught my eye. She sat in a chair in the corner of the room for pretty much the whole night. She never had a drink in her hand, never spoke to anyone, never really moved her head. She just sat perfectly still for the whole night. Anyway, time flew by and it was roughly 3 a.m. when all the guests had left. I was cleaning up, and in the chair the girl was sitting in was a diary. There was no name or any noticeable cover. The only word on the front was, "Dear Diary." I guess curiosity got the best of me because I stopped cleaning and took a seat to read through the book. I flipped to the first page and it read, "Dear Diary, Mom and Dad just brought me to this house. It's a lot smaller than my old home, the walls are falling apart and the floor is stained. I hate it here. I miss my old home. My friends. My school. I want to go home. I wondered if this could be the girl that passed away in the house a few years ago. But I kept flipping the pages either way. Dear Diary, it's been 2 months and I still hate it at this place. Mom and Dad have started arguing a lot. First it was about me missing school. But now they argue about silly things like Dad not taking the bins out on time. Poor girl, being forced to move away from her home, her friends, and all the memories she has there. And on top of that, her parents are now arguing. A few months later, I found a new job. Made a load of new friends and even started seeing this really cute girl. By now I had forgotten all about the diary. I think I put it in one of the spare bedrooms in a closet somewhere. Which is why, when I returned home from work and saw it sitting in the middle of the hall, I panicked. The guest room door was lying wide open and the closet door was open too. I called the police reporting a break-in and 2 officers showed up and looked around the place. Nothing was missing, nothing was moved apart from the diary and no one was found in the house. The officers left and I hesitantly opened the diary. No new writing, no pages missing. It was the exact same as it was the last time I saw it. I flipped to the last page I read and continued reading. Dear Diary, I can't take it anymore. Mom and Dad have turned their aggression towards me. Dad even hit me the other day for being late home. They hate me. I have no friends here. I hate this house, I hate that school, I hate my parents. I hate my life. This will be my last entry. For whoever might read this, Mom or Dad, I hate you. Whoever else, I'm sorry. And that was it. The rest of the pages were blank. I felt so bad for the girl. She was so young and her life turned to hell all because of this house. I put the diary back in the closet and decided to get ready for bed. I was awoken around 4 a.m. to a loud crash coming from the guest room. I found an old glass bottle and took it with me to see what made that noise. I slowly opened the door and on the bed was the diary. I searched the house but again, nothing stolen, nothing moved, no one to be seen. And so, I picked up the diary and flipped the pages. Shivers ran down my spine as I noticed there was a new diary entry. Dear Diary, life is much more peaceful now. Mom and Dad sold the house and a new man moved in. I attended his party and had such a great time. No one came to speak to me but that was okay. I prefer to be left alone. I'm sure we can be great friends but I just don't know how to introduce myself to him. How is this possible? This has to be some joke. One of my friends might have found the diary. I know my best friend has a spare key so he's just trying to freak me out. As I sat wondering what was going on I thought I saw someone walking past the door towards the bathroom. I ran out as fast as I could and as I turned into the hall the bathroom door slammed shut. I shoved the door open but there was no one there. I checked behind the shower curtain but there was no one. I called the police again and it was the same result. They warned me if I made a false call again they would have to take action against me. I forced myself to forget about the situation. I put the diary in a box, put a padlock on it and buried it outside in the backyard. A few days later I was just sitting on the sofa watching a movie when I heard a woman's voice coming from one of the rooms. I paused the movie and the voice continued. I started walking towards the hall and the voice came to a stop. I searched the house and couldn't find anyone. The voice started once more as I sat back down, this time it was quite clearly coming from the guest room once again. So I marched towards the room and swung the door open. I almost fell to the ground when I saw a girl sitting on the edge of the bed with her back turned to me. She slowly turned her head and I recognized her, she was the girl from my housewarming party. She gave me a smile and turned her head back round to face the wall. I ran out of that house as fast as I could and didn't look back. I ran to my friend's place where he called the police for me. They searched the house and they said the only thing they found was a book. My heart skipped a beat when they handed me that diary. I've had enough of this. I put the house up for sale and started looking for a new place. Strange things kept happening during the following weeks. Things were moved, that cursed diary kept showing up at random places. I sold my house to a lovely elderly couple. I was about to tell them about the diary, but I kept it to myself. I found a new place about an hour's drive away, moved in, and everything was fine for a few months. I had just returned from visiting my girlfriend, and right there on the table was a book. No cover, no writing. I slowly walked towards it and opened it up. All the pages were blank apart from the very last page. All it read: "Dear Diary, I'm back. I'm writing this to you to warn you off from being an idiot like I was, and because I have to confess the atrocities I committed. I can't live with myself anymore, and after I write this I'm going to kill myself. I know the internet is a harsh judge of people who do terrible things, and I'm certainly among that class of people. After you read this, you'll understand and likely will even encourage me to go through with it, so don't take pity on me. I dug my grave and it's time for me to lie in it. I've been in ballet since I was 7 years old. It was my life, my love, my obsession, and ultimately, my destruction. I wanted to be that beautiful woman who everyone was watching up on the stage. That delicate beauty whose movements flowed like water, every step and jump artistry in motion. Unfortunately, no matter how much I practiced, no matter how many hours I spent trying, I was just never good enough. Always a side character in any ballet I actually got into, which were few and far between. Never getting larger roles, and there were always other women miles better than me. When I was 23, I knew if I didn't do something, anything, I would never dance like I'd dreamed of all my life, so desperation drove me to madness. I'd done my research, I'd read the right books, and I'd managed to learn a little bit from some of the elders in my family about dark rituals and how to do them. I was told again and again you have to be clever when dealing with demons, and I thought I knew what I was doing. I summoned a demon that I bound to an agreement. I would get 7 years of perfect dancing. The best roles, the best theaters, the fame, and everything that comes with it. The demon would get my firstborn child. Now I know, giving a non-existent child to a demon for who knows what is sick and wrong. I had no intention of giving that thing to any child. After my debut as the Swan in Swan Lake ended, proving my plan worked, I did what I thought was brilliant, I got a full hysterectomy. I've never been attracted to men, but you know that's no sure protection from fertility. So I made sure they took all the right parts. During my time in Swan Lake I met a beautiful woman named Caesar. Seeing as she was another dancer, we danced together in production after production over the years. We lived together and everything was perfect. Caesar told me in confidence she was infertile due to medical issues, and I breathed a sigh of relief that neither of us could physically have children. No way for the demon to collect, so I thought we would be safe from its demands. The years went by like water over a river, fast and wild, yet steady. I knew my time in the spotlight was drawing to a close, and I started to worry what the demon would do when it learned of my betrayal. I sent Caesar away to visit her family in another country, then summoned the demon again. When it appeared, it was much larger and more horrifying than I remembered. It sniffed at me and made this screeching noise like a dying cat. It roared in rage and picked me up, putting its face desperately close to mine. You had no intention of honoring our agreement. You will give me your soul, or I will take away the thing you love the most. I closed my eyes in fear and horror and told it I would never give it my soul. It could take away my dancing, it could break my body, but it couldn't have my soul. It grunted, put me down and smiled in a way that sent ice down my spine. "Very well. Your next dance will be your last." With that it disappeared, leaving only a small spot of soot to prove its existence. I knew in the end this would be the cost. My last dance, then my talent would be gone like it never existed. I had lined up my very last dance to coincide with the date of our agreement. My beautiful Césaire was dancing as well, in a lesser role than my own. I knew this was our last chance to ever be able to be together like this, to dance side by side, and could barely hide my tears of regret while we warmed up together backstage. The music began and on my K I danced out, losing myself in the movement and music for the very last time. When it was Césaire's turn to be on the floor, she danced out with the others. That big smile on her beautiful face. She took her first leap and when she came down her femur bone broke in half with a crack that could be heard over the music. She dropped to the floor, and every part of her that touched the ground was followed by snaps and cracks as every bone that met resistance fractured. The music was cut while the audience screamed in shock and horror. I ran to her screaming and crying, and went to hold her close to me. When I put my arms around her shoulders to pull her into my arms, I saw the fright in her eyes and her labored breathing for a split second before I felt the vertebrae in her neck shatter under my arm. She was dead so fast I didn't even understand what had happened at first. Her body was taken from me as I wailed and tried to hold her close, every bone in her body disintegrating at my feverish clutching. As they zipped up the body bag it was so badly misshapen it didn't even resemble a human at all. I realized then that dance wasn't the greatest love of my life anymore. It had always been the center of my existence, so I didn't see what was right in front of me when that demon smiled its twisted response at my refusal. I realized in that moment the demon knew exactly how to punish me for breaking our arrangement, and that my recklessness had cost Césaire her life and taken away everything I loved in one fell swoop. It turned my true love of dancing into an aberration and took the only person who I ever loved more than dancing from me. I've tried summoning it again and again but that demon never returned at my attempts, nor did any others. I spoke to people who know about these things, and they tell me I've been marked. That all demons will refuse to acknowledge my existence now that I've been proven to be untrustworthy. I'd give my soul to get her back, alive, healthy and dancing. I'd give my soul just so she can live again, even if it means I die without ever getting to see her. I'd give my soul right now to never have made this deal, to never have danced, even to never have met my beautiful Césaire. She shouldn't have to pay the price for my choices, but no matter what I do I'm forced to live this reality without her. I'd give anything to not have done what I did, but now there's nothing I can do to turn back time and give up my soul to save the real true love of my life. I'm not sure if anyone can get to read this, but I don't have a lot of time. My name is David, I'm 23 and a male. My cat, Jinx, has been acting weird lately. I was laying down on my sofa at around 2:43 a.m. when I suddenly heard scratching from the kitchen, the room closest to where I was at that moment. I of course ignored it, thinking that Jinx was just playing, or trying to get something. When I heard a thud, that concerned me, so I went to check it out. I stood up and began to peer into the kitchen, when I saw it. A blood trail, and my cat, trying to hide it. I almost vomited at the sight of blood and pieces of flesh and skin randomly spread out in a large line, leading out of the kitchen window. I instructed my cat to go into the living room, where I was originally laying, but it wouldn't budge. I even placed his favorite treat on the living room floor, but still no movement. I eventually managed to move my cat out the way and followed the trail. It was dark and cold out, and I was in a onesie, with a candle, which let off a dim light, bright enough for me to barely see the trail. Around 2 m of the bloody trail later, it led into an alley, where I saw it. My cat. Shred into pieces, blood surrounding it. I stood there. Staring. My eyes were watering and I began to cry. But in the blurriness, I managed to make out the numbers 50,117 written with blood, my cat's blood, on the wall. I gagged and cried at the messed up scene, when something struck me. The cat from the kitchen was not my cat. I'm currently hiding in a pile of rubbish bags and bins, because I can hear the cat from the kitchen scratching against the brick wall where Jinx laid, one eye stuffed in his mouth. What should I do? This morning I had awakened for the third time in a panicked fright. I had no recollection of what had happened that got me here in this cold dark room by myself. The world turned around me as I sat and stared at the ever-growing wall in front of me. I could not get used to this feeling of dread that filled the room. I did not know how long I had been here. It seemed as if days passed. There were no windows in this room. Just as I was about to try to find a way to escape this dark damp place, a sound had come from behind me. I turned slowly so as not to bring a hostile feeling to the already dread-filled room. A man had spoken loudly and clearly, telling me to get up and to follow him. I nodded my head and followed. As I walked behind the man, I had this feeling, this sense that I was going to be okay. We entered a large ballroom with a single chair in the middle of the floor under a large glass chandelier. The man turned to me with a stern, cold look and told me to sit. I begrudgingly agreed to sit in the chair, not knowing what was to come next. Then all of a sudden, without any warning, the room went black. Red lights had started to flash. I began to panic because the noises of the alarms made it harder to focus and calm down. There was a large growl that had come from beneath the alarms. It sent chills down my body even with all that noise. I was able to hear this growl clearly, as if it was next to me. The man ran back into the room, grabbed my arm and said, "Let's go." I stopped and yelled at the man, "What is it?" He replied, "Don't worry about it." As we continued through the hallway, the sounds got louder. This feeling of dread got heavier. It was harder to breathe. Then it was black. No sound, no alarms, no man. I stopped dead. I could not see anything or hear anything, and then it happened. I had this sense that someone knows something was watching me. I tried not to turn and look into the darkness. I made my mistake there. I was face to face with a darker blackness than what was around me. It had no scent, no structure. It was almost as if it was not even there at all, but I wish that was the case. It grabbed me, throwing me around like a child's plaything. It threw me into the darkness where I was able to catch my footing and start running. At this moment I heard the man again. This time, however, it was not his voice but his pleas to God to save his soul. I had managed to make my way to a door that had light behind it. I slowly opened the door. There in front of me was the room I had awoken in, but it was brighter and happier. Was I dead, I thought. It can't be the creature that never caught me, I said to myself in a panic. A routine LiDAR scan of the planet's surface uncovered the ruins of an unknown civilization, hidden in the Amazon rainforest. The dense canopy of undergrowth had camouflaged the abandoned city for more than 4,000 years. There it remained obscured until the geomapping technology saw through the lush fabric of vegetation. The wealth of partially visible architectural work spurred archaeologists to investigate. I headed the expedition. We knew precisely where it was. Getting to the location was the challenge. There wasn't an airport or landing strip within 80 miles of the remote spot. There were no towns or native villages nearby. The jungle had reclaimed the once thriving city as its own. It was as far off the map as any other point in civilization. We organized a rugged team of experts and raised funding through numerous scientific and educational institutions. Interest was incredibly high, as was the cost of mounting the ambitious project. The heavy equipment alone needed to get us there was over $10 million. Finding qualified personnel to bring aboard was another hurdle. There were numerous archaeologists ready to jump at the opportunity, but we also needed industrial drivers and trained equipment operators. Someone had to bulldoze us a road to the site, but had enough finesse and tact with the huge earth movers, backhoes, and excavators to be delicate where it counted. We needed cooks, laundry people, doctors, carpenters, and every other occupational expert it required to build a mobile village in the middle of a jungle. That detail is very important to this story. Staging and planning are crucial to any project of this size. They call it the rainforest for a reason. There are usually a few brief, seasonal respites from the torrential downpours. It didn't matter if we assembled the perfect team to excavate this lost civilization, if they were at risk of drowning from swollen rivers or unrelenting precipitation. We had to be in place during the dry season and work long, hard hours when we could. The infrastructure had to be perfect, based on weather predictions and the best planning we could orchestrate. My team launched the project right on the target date. I was quite proud that everything fell precisely into place. The dig site and our camp took shape so quickly I could hardly believe it. The sights, sounds, and fragrant scents of the jungle were simply captivating. I couldn't wait to dig into the rich virgin soil and introduce the world to a long-forgotten chapter of history. It was incredibly thrilling to realize what important work we were about to embark upon. The road, housing, sanitation, medical station, and food storage units were set up and ready. A few minor squabbles occurred between members of the team, but any time you assemble complete strangers in a remote, hostile environment, tempers are bound to flare. Those hiccups were minimal and easily navigated. Almost immediately, we realized the architecture was drastically different from other prehistoric Latin American cultures. So much so, it was startling. This civilization predated the Aztec, Olmec, Mayan, and Incan societies by roughly a millennia, yet their building style and tolerances nearly rivaled modern standards. Laser measuring devices on their square surfaces and archways showed little more than a millimeter of inconsistency. If nothing else, that metric spoke volumes about them. I'd seen a few photographs from the advanced scouting team which were exciting, but to witness the massive, vine-covered buildings jutting out of the hillsides offered another degree of wow. It was fascinating to see evidence of advanced people who last lived there during the Stone Age. It begged the question, what happened to them? We didn't know, but hoped to solve that and many other mysteries. Our landscaping experts cleared the foliage around the camp so we could get to work. It was painstakingly slow, but eventually we had a baseline to start the process. As soon as our tools pierced the organic soil, the removal of centuries of sediment and debris revealed exciting new details. We quickly understood the area in need of clearing was much greater than what we'd allowed for. I instructed the deforestation crew to expand the perimeter outward by a quarter mile. In the end, even that wasn't enough. Surface evidence soon revealed the ruins stretched far beyond our original estimates and projections. It occurred to the chief field archaeologist that our excavation could actually be multiple smaller city-states, which had grown together. Details discovered later, however, refuted his overlap theory. Our dig site was possibly the largest prehistoric city of the Bronze Age, eclipsing the impressive populations of Uruk, and Athens. We were in for a shock when we surveyed the scale of the dwellings. The archways, ceiling clearance, and high window openings suggested a race of abnormal behemoths. The thing about that was, many buildings in prehistoric times were constructed out of proportion with their physical needs. It was driven by excessive pride and vanity. The relative size of the structures themselves didn't prove anything conclusive. We knew that, but the highly unusual skeletal remains we unearthed soon after, certainly did. At a time when the average adult human was barely 5 feet tall, the bizarre remains pulled from the Royal Cemetery all had oblong skulls and elongated features. The shortest of them would have stood over 7 feet tall. Incredibly, the children were exceptionally lanky as well, based on numerous deformed femur specimens we uncovered. With unfused cranial sutures and a lack of adult teeth, they died before puberty. Regardless, they were exceptional in height too. It was apparently a society of malformed giants. To say we were troubled would have been an understatement. Our chief biologist theorized there might have been rampant inbreeding within the royal family population, or pituitary tumors causing abnormal gigantism. The puzzling growth deformities were consistent across the upper-class remains in the royal gravesite, and made up the majority of the bones we discovered. A handful of normal-height skeletal exceptions were located interred in a mass grave, elsewhere. Their pauper burials indicated they were lower-class citizens, and had been discarded with a cold, haphazard indifference. It was a total paradox to the abnormally developed individuals carefully placed in their memorial tombs. Our puzzling discovery of deformed Bronze Age giants might have been unparalleled, but that was only the beginning. The team found strange tool relics at the dig sites which had no clear purpose. Their impressive artifacts pointed to an advanced culture of craftsmanship. That much was certain. Even among the leaders of the ancient world, we soon realized this lost Amazonian tribe possessed a higher level of technical knowledge than their contemporaries. In some ways, what we discovered came close to rivaling our modern capabilities. Ornate sigils and pictographs donned the stone palace walls we processed. Our resident linguist recorded the cryptic characters and diligently worked to decipher them. His video footage and still photographs were uploaded to the University Computer Lab for artificial intelligence analysis. Luckily, we had a secure satellite link to fast-track the process. I'd hoped for at least a partial translation in order to learn more about our long-absent hosts, but those things can take years. I wasn't holding my breath. Sometimes an old language is never unraveled. I didn't expect results during the primary dig season but hoped for some insight to the basic characters. However, with the advent of supercomputers and specialized software, faster results can happen. In our case, the basic language was partially broken in 3 days. As amazing as that was, I wish I could have been more thrilled with the benefits of the technology. Like an unwanted storm cloud overhead, the unpleasant things we learned from the translation completely darkened my mood. I didn't want to believe any of it at first. I thought their written history inscribed on the town square walls was merely creative mythology. I didn't think they actually believed they came from another solar system, or that their species enslaved the human race in order to eat them. It read like morbid tales from a batty grandmother, entertaining her unruly grandchildren. Unfortunately, it went a long way in explaining the mass burial pit of normal human bones. It was getting harder by the minute to dismiss the craziness we'd recently uncovered, as simply the handing down of grisly folklore to the next generation. According to the inscriptions, they called their people, the uneasy Lem, as closely as we could pronounce it. Finally we had a name for the culture, but I was hesitant to share that with the investors. Some required regular updates on our progress because they intended to develop television specials. Others intended to open a museum wing with exclusive artifacts from our excavations. Regardless of their interest in the project, all the investors expected a financial return on their investment. They were expecting another Aztec-like culture. Human sacrifice aside, the Aztecs were practically Boy Scouts compared to these 7-foot-tall cannibal ghouls. None of the sponsors would be too thrilled to learn that uneasy Lem were freakishly tall, had elongated skulls and torsos, and believed they were space aliens. As if that wasn't bad enough, they prided themselves in enslaving humanity as their primary food source. Those bullet points were probably going to be a little bit too dark for primetime television. I sent photos of the stonework and general progress reports to stall for time. That seemed to keep them satisfied. I didn't dare reveal we'd translated some writing inscriptions and stumbled upon a bizarre history of the Nephilim tribe. That, and unknown devices of questionable origin buried in the ruins. The further down we went, the stronger the evidence appeared. I didn't want to entertain the completely bonkers idea of an extinct Amazon race being from another planet, but the growing list of details we'd compiled about them was definitely compelling. We were all thinking it, but none of us dared say it out loud. In this business, such an outrageous claim would lead to academic and career suicide. The laser-like precision of their building construction, their highly abnormal skeletal remains, and the unknown cache of tools we unearthed added significantly to those worries. My dig foreman Mark Davis took me aside. He obviously wanted to show me something, but was hesitant to do so. I told him whatever he had to share was confidential and safe with me. That reassured him, so he led me to the object of his concern. In the center of the buried city, his team had excavated down to a new level within the ruins. A large tarp covered the area of focus, in what we knew to be the royal palace. I looked at him for an explanation. He scanned my face to make sure I was ready to inspect whatever was under there. Then he motioned for me to crouch to the side. For what reason, I couldn't begin to imagine. The build-up was killing me. At that point I figured anything was possible. For the museum's sake, I hoped it was some golden, bejeweled artifact they could proudly display. It wasn't. He removed the tarp slowly. I thought he was doing it to enhance the big reveal. The truth was, he knew what was under there. I didn't. He realized every single person on Earth's life was about to change, as soon as I saw the terrifying thing it covered up. At first, I couldn't follow what I saw. It was just too disturbing to comprehend. For lack of a better description, there was a huge stone frame under the covering. It was almost like a crude, large-screen TV, except the edges went all the way to the ground. The matrix screen inside this border frame was partially opaque to the eye and shimmered like a liquid reflection. It became obvious the device we'd uncovered. Broadcast footage of another world. One where the Nephilim obviously lived. The skies were purplish green. There were at least 3 moons visible in the horizon. Worse still, it seemed likely it was live footage. For the first known time in roughly 4,000 years, an extraterrestrial of their species was witnessed by human beings, in living form. It walked by the screen, completely unaware of our discreet observation. I guess the view on their side had been blocked by tons of debris for so long, it became invisible to them. They were so hideous, I gasped out loud. We'd accidentally opened a window into another world which definitely needed to be closed. Pronto. The foreman visibly cringed. He held his finger to his mouth in the universal symbol of H. Be quiet. They'll hear us. I'd assumed it was a one-way monitor. His reaction suggested it was actually a two-way, mutual feed. I shivered at the thought and backed away. We simultaneously grabbed both sides of the tarp and covered it again before we were spotted by one of them. In what I could only assume was a bloody, protracted battle with our human ancestors, the frame had been closed, 4,000 years ago. They must have burned the alien city to the ground and destroyed it in revolt. Unknowingly, we dug it back up and potentially exposed ourselves to the same bloodthirsty humanoids who killed people for food. After we were far enough away to speak freely. I asked Davis how many others in his crew knew about the Nephilim two-way monitor. His reply lit a fire under me, and chilled me to the bone at the same time. 3 of my crew members were present. Trust me, they're just as traumatized about this revelation as we are. I swore them to secrecy, but who could keep a secret like that? Far more importantly though, it's not a monitor. It's actually an open portal between worlds. Did you smell that awful stench? That came from their planet as the wind blew toward us. During the uncovering of the relic edges, I witnessed some lizard-like creature crawl from its side, to ours. I know about reptiles. This wasn't an organism from the Earth. I smashed the thing immediately with my boot, but there's absolutely nothing to stop anything else from coming through that damn portal. My knees buckled. I looked at him in disbelief. He was serious as a heart attack, and I knew he was telling the truth. I had caught a whiff of their foul wind when we observed the portal. It smelled of carnage and death. I didn't want that fate again for humanity. There was only one thing I could think to do, to stop it from happening, and it had to be done immediately. Even cross-contamination of other alien species was a risk I wasn't willing to accept. We had to move. I called a mandatory meeting with all my staff members. I suspect many of them thought I was going to make an announcement about our incredible success in excavating the dig site. Boy, were they disappointed. I tried to imagine their reactions to being told murderous aliens had built the prehistoric city we were rapidly unearthing. It started as the career opportunity of a lifetime. Who wouldn't want to help uncover a previously unknown Amazonian tribe? Unfortunately, I was about to crush their hopes and dreams. It was of paramount importance for us to destroy everything we'd accomplished. All in the essential goal of preventing them from ever coming back. The thing is, news travels fast. Davis's crew members had already blabbed the facts, and those recipients shared it with others, exponentially. I think anyone, biologist or not, who saw the massive deformed bones we pulled from the graves knew something wasn't right. The carpenters realized no ordinary group of human beings would have constructed the structures. It wasn't a huge leap to accept we've unearthed things better left buried. Contrary to the doubts I expected from my outlandish, but 100% true statement, the entire team was on board with what we had to do. This was bigger than any of our egos. In the initial interview process, I asked each prospective member about their unique qualifications and interests. Earlier, I mentioned how that was pertinent. Let me explain. Hervé Delacroix had worked as a demolition expert. While he specialized in controlled construction explosions for the tunnel industry, he was also more than qualified to blow this dangerous gateway back to hell. Our nutritionist Molly Stone is also a graphic artist, and a damn fine one. I've seen her work. It's spectacular, but that's not what I needed from her. I wanted her to create semi-believable fake Photoshop files of the artifacts and ruins. I wanted things to appear as if the entire expedition was a hoax to mislead the investors. Only an obvious portfolio of convincing but manipulated fakes would prevent some other organization from coming back to the ruins in the future to undo our necessary raising of it. Hervé wired the portal with enough dynamite to obliterate a mountain. Molly went to work on the next set of investor-proof photos. It must have been a challenge to take real photos of the alien city walls, and twist them enough with imaging software so they looked like poor digital forgeries. She towed the line between authentic and "I don't think that's real" very, very well. Her manipulated images would cause an immediate investigation into our remote project. Before anything else could creep or climb through that portal between worlds, we blew it to Kingdom Gone. Hervé rigged the bank of explosives masterfully, so the sides of the walls caved in on themselves. Then we used our fleet of heavy equipment to bury the remnants even deeper than it had been before. There were no walls left standing, and all the alien devices were destroyed and buried under tons of rubble. In all, our efforts made it so no future satellite scan would pick up any remnants of the lost Nephilim civilization. Fingers crossed. The faked images worked like a charm. I was summoned back to the US to explain the photographic inconsistencies. I'm not much of an actor, but I think I pulled it off well. I had to confess in court proceedings to the conspiracy of defrauding investors of millions. My career as an eminent archaeologist is over, but obviously some things are more important than fame or glory. I took full blame for everything. There was no sense in my fantastic team being dragged through the legal system. Hopefully they can still get work in their chosen fields. Regardless, none of us will ever forget the danger of what lies in the shadow of the ruins. In the picturesque, seemingly idyllic town of Seedling, nestled within the verdant countryside, lived a young, adventurous boy named Eddie. Eddie was an average boy with an extraordinary penchant for watermelons. He loved the sweet, juicy pulp, the crisp bite, and the refreshing taste that perfectly complemented the sweltering summer heat. Every year, Seedling hosted its renowned annual fair, a kaleidoscope of colors, sounds, and mouth-watering aromas. The fair was a spectacle that turned the sleepy town into a bustling hub of excitement. Eddie looked forward to this event each year, particularly because of one event, the watermelon eating contest. It was a simple game with a single rule: enjoy as much watermelon as you please. But never, under any circumstances, consume the seeds. One scorching summer day, as the sun beat down and the air danced with the tantalizing smell of food and fresh hay, the long-awaited contest began. Eddie, pumped with adrenaline and a year's worth of anticipation, began gorging on the watermelon slices before him. In his fervor, he neglected the cardinal rule and accidentally swallowed a seed. Days morphed into weeks, and Eddie began to undergo a peculiar transformation. His skin, usually soft and supple, grew tougher and started to take on a strange, greenish hue. His body, once lean and agile, swelled and rounded out, making him appear almost spherical. His incessant thirst could only be quenched by water. And his normal appetite seemed to vanish, replaced by an unexplainable craving for the cool earth beneath him. The townsfolk watched this transformation in hushed horror and fascinated disbelief. Children would stare as Eddie lumbered down the streets, his body as rotund and green as a freshly picked watermelon. Whispers followed him around, speculating about his condition, and the swallowed seed became a legend in its own right. As time passed, Eddie felt an inexplicable bond with the earth. He yearned to bask in the open fields, to feel the nurturing soil underneath him. Unable to resist this primal call, Eddie began to spend his days and nights in the fields, lying amidst the tall, swaying crops. One afternoon, the local children, oblivious to Eddie's predicament, decided to engage in a game of kickball in the very same field. The game was intense, the laughter and shouts echoing across the open expanse. Amidst this frenzy, Eddie was too slow to move out of the path of a speeding kickball. With a loud thud, the ball struck him, sending him tumbling down the field. Eddie broke open with a chilling, juicy crunch, revealing a river of red pulpy fruit and black seeds. His transformation was tragically complete. A silence fell over the field as the children approached the remnants of their friend. The sweet, tantalizing aroma of fresh watermelon wafted in the air, making their mouths water. Overcome by curiosity, thirst, and the heat of the summer day, they succumbed to the temptation. They ate the fruit, seeds and all, oblivious to the dreadful fate they had sealed for themselves. The repercussions were swift and unnerving. Over the next few weeks, the children began experiencing changes similar to Eddie's. Their skin started turning green, their bodies began to swell, and an insatiable thirst consumed them. The once lively and bustling town of Seedling fell eerily silent as one child after another transformed into watermelons. Thus began the curse of Seedling. Each summer, a fresh set of victims fell prey to the transformation, only to be consumed and perpetuate the cycle. The once joyous and lively summer fair turned into a season of dread and fear. Yet, the curse of the watermelon was as fascinating as it was terrifying. Despite the horror of the transformation, the townsfolk found themselves drawn to the sweet, juicy watermelons that their friends became. The temptation was irresistible. Each year, more townsfolk would eat the fruit, ingest the seeds, and the cycle of transformation would begin anew. As the years passed, the annual transformation became a macabre tradition in Seedling. The townsfolk began to accept their fate, the summer season no longer filled with the usual excitement of the fair but with a resigned anticipation of the curse. The children who hadn't experienced the transformation awaited their turn with a strange mix of fear and excitement. The legend of the watermelon curse seeped into the very fabric of Seedling. Travelers were warned, tales were told, and the annual fair became a grim spectacle. Yet, the allure of the sweet watermelon and the mystery of the transformation were too enticing to resist. Those who ate the fruit and seeds couldn't help but marvel at the strange, delicious beauty of their predicament, even as they turned into watermelons themselves. And so, the never-ending harvest continued in the town of Seedling. The eerie silence during the height of summer was broken only by the sound of watermelons being sliced open. The delicious aroma of fresh watermelon filled the air, serving as both a grim reminder and a tantalizing invitation. Over time, the town of Seedling became infamous for its watermelon curse. Visitors arrived from afar to witness the transformations and taste the cursed fruit. Some left terrified, others intrigued, but all carried the seed of the story in their hearts, spreading the legend of Seedling and its never-ending harvest far and wide. And so, the cycle continued, an eerie testament to Eddie's mistake and the inescapable allure of the watermelon, a sweet horror that blossomed each summer, casting its long, chilling shadow over the once peaceful town of Seedling. This is a memory I've wanted to forget for a long time. In the last 3 years since it happened, I've tried to grow and build my life to never return to that place again. In the early fall of 2019, I was admitted for 9 days in an Indianapolis mental health facility. A psych ward for mentally unfit people such as myself at the time. The experience I had there not only was horrible, but also made me understand how hard I need to work in this everyday world so I may not ever have to be locked away in that prison ever again. My first 3 days were in triage. It's basically a holding cell where the hospital watches you to make sure you're alive, and that's about it. I remember coming in and out of consciousness. Completely alone, quite unsure of the time or where I was. Every time I asked if there was a bed open, they said it was too full and I had to wait. Now at the time, I didn't want to go to the psych ward, but I had just gotten hit with another arrest, lot of drugs in the back of my car, and my parents were adamant that I needed a change. I did. I was deep into a hard drug addiction and I really did need help. I thought admission to a hospital would be the best option over jail. So, as reluctant as I was compliant, knowing that these types of processes never go faster when you are resilient. The hospital took my possessions away. All of my clothing was taken as well, and for the first 3 days. While still in the triage, and starting withdrawal from the hard drugs, I had nothing but one hospital gown to keep us warm all night. They also don't know much about actual healthcare down there. I am a type 1 diabetic, and need shots at various and sometimes unpredicted times throughout the day, but none of the nurses were allowed to give me any insulin but only 2 times a day, when usually I give myself upwards of over 8 to 9 shots a day. I thought I would go to a hospital to get professional help, but when most of them aren't authorized to actually help with my other immediate health problems, it is very frustrating. My first night I crawled out of bed and into the hallway where I threw up all and screamed until someone finally came and helped me. The last 6 days spent were all on one designated floor of the hospital. The whole floor plan was mostly open to the residents, but it circled around like a racetrack oval hallway, giving you a weird feeling like there was no amount of walking you could do, you were never going to get out, just loop around and around and around. In the middle of the whole place were locked doors. The nurses would go in and out to get medicine/snacks, etc. There were doors everywhere in the ward, and none of them opened. Everywhere you looked were reminders of the fact that you were trapped there. You couldn't leave even if you wanted to. The more you tried to be like yourself, the more they would take away from you until you comply with the program. But, one day, to try and break this perpetual liminal cycle and also just bored out of my mind, I went and opened one of the doors at random. Surprisingly, the curved aluminum handle gave way, and I stumbled into a dark room lit by computers. It had a warm and stuffy smell, like whoever occupied it had been sitting there for a long time. The very air from inside the room seemed to lunge out the door as it was opened with the same accidental ferocity as I had clumsily fallen into it. As I awkwardly grunted and got back to my feet, I was taken aback by the 7 different people in this room. They were not dressed like doctors or nurses. They had on dark polo shirts and dark business pants. As strange as that was, it didn't catch my eye as much as what was on all their computer monitors. They were all watching live camera feeds of us. Us in our rooms, us in the common area. All the time. Whatever tiny sliver of privacy or freedom I thought I had, was now completely gone. I was completely trapped here. I also was witness to my roommate Ethan, who when he got mad at the fact that he couldn't have any of his stuff without asking permission, was tackled, tasered, and drugged with a syringe in the ass, all while being dog-piled on and handcuffed by 3 fully equipped and fully armed police officers. I had been deprived of everything. My friends, family, apartment, job, car. Even my own clothes had been stripped away from me. I had no choices, no freedoms, and no hold on what reality could really mean for me. I feel like if you took anyone, stripped them of their possessions, their rights, their human given name, and you would leave them feeling just about as crazy as most of us did in that unlivable ward. It was all horrible. I know that hospitals are supposed to help people, but because of the system in place, mental health facilities have become a place that strips you of your identity, makes you conform to survive, spies on you, and punishes behavior it believes is intolerable with a swift and cruel nature. They do not care about you. You are alone. And some poor souls never find a way out.